Hello, everyone. This is your host, Manoj Tandon. Welcome to another episode of Dark Rhino Security Confidential. Today, we have yet another great guest. Before I announce him, please reminding you to hit the like and subscribe button. It helps with the algorithms. It helps us keep bringing this great content to you. So do us a favor, hit the like and subscribe button. Now, while you guys are all here, is to listen to Chris Rees. He's our guest today. Chris has been in the industry for many, many years. He's a professional information technologist, an author, a trainer, a manager, and a lifelong learner, as he likes to put it. You know, he's created over 80 IT certification and training courses. 52 or so have been on Plurasight, and his students have watched over 1 million hours of his content, which is really very impressive. So he really enjoys helping people advance in their careers through training and personal development. He's a former law enforcement officer. Thank you for being here, Chris. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you very much as well. It's a pleasure and honor to be here today.
Yeah, likewise. So tell us a little bit about your background. You were in law enforcement before?
Sure. Yeah. I started out my career in law enforcement back in the early 90s. I was there for about 7 years, 8 years. Came from a law enforcement family. So my father was a 40-year police officer, police chief. My brother, I had sister-in-law, cousins. Basically the whole family in some capacity was law enforcement. My grandfather was a representative, so he was in politics, not so much as far as law enforcement, but public service. And so that's kind of where things started off. So I started really getting into IT way before I got into law enforcement, or I should say tech. Back when I was like, say, 4th or 5th grade, we had they called it a gifted program back then. You go like a half day to a different school and you would learn about computers. And back then it was like TRS-80s and TI-99s on cassette decks with storage. There was no disk drives or none of that. No hard drives.
You know, that stuff dates you. I don't know how many people even know what a trash 80 is, but
I know. Yeah. And so even when I went into law enforcement, I always tried to kind of marry the two together. So after a few years in patrol, I went into detectives and started doing computer crime investigations, and things kind of went on from there. And then in 2014, Pluralsight, I was introduced to those folks and was able to jump over and start creating training for that company. That's been a great experience as well ever since. So with Pluralsight, I've, as you mentioned, I've done 52 courses now on Security Plus is the main stay. So I've been doing that one since 2014, and it's been SY 401, 501, 601, 701. So each new iteration of that course, I update the training and make it new and relevant for that specific courseware. And then I've done some stuff on disaster recovery and business continuity, malware analysis, high-level courses, some security management courses, and then some end-user training around like social media and personal privacy and AI, like a primer on AI and just cybersecurity in general, things along those lines. Another course coming out shortly on basically cybersecurity around Internet of Things. So whatever basically is applicable and relevant in the industry, I try to keep up on and make it not just informative but enjoyable. I try to really make the analogies between real world things you may run into and the technical aspects, but not so much so that it's a snooze fest, because as we know, technology can get really deep very quickly, and if you don't make it engaging, they'll drop off quickly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Keeping their attention is a challenge, especially I'm sure a lot of these topics can get very, very deep very, very quickly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can get lost in the technical jungle quite rapidly, and it's hard to keep someone's attention. That's an art.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to ask you a couple questions as you were describing your background here. In the early days, what was some of the cyber crimes that you came across, or computer crimes? And have they changed that much to today?
Yeah, that's a good question. The short answer is, well, they're always evolving, but at its base, it's a lot of the same stuff over and over again, because cybersecurity really is not a lot of times a technical problem. It's more of like a people problem with a tech interface. So people do the same silly things, the same dumb things over and over again. The ways, the tools they use might get more advanced, but a lot of it is social engineering. A lot of it is preying on people's goodwill, and people, just assume that people are doing things for the right reason, so they'll give information more freely than they should. When I started out, and again, this is back in the early '90s, so cybercrime was usually either um, uh, like bank fraud, or those types of things, or somebody hacking an account, which was relatively new and easy back then. It wasn't very sophisticated. Or a lot of it was like online predator type of investigations, and those things. I mean, even it's evolved into Dateline, and I used to do this similar types of things before Dateline was even a show, and that amazes me still to this day that the same exact things happen now, even as popular or as well known as those things are. People are still getting caught up and still getting snagged in those types of scams, or not scams, but incidents, just because it's, like I said, it's a mindset thing. It's not a technology thing.
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that. I think
Yeah.
our audience is probably tired of hearing me say that, but cybersecurity is not an IT problem. It is a business problem. And
Hmm.
that is all you can do is manage it. You're not going to
Right.
solve it in its entirety because it's a behavioral issue, as you very rightfully pointed out.
Right.
Now, has the cast of characters changed? Like back then, like now we see you have the ransomware for hire, you have ransomware as a service, or a lot of people in the Far East or Asia,
Hmm.
um, Middle East, Africa, a lot of international bad actors. What was it back then?
Yeah, back then, like I said, it was a lot less sophisticated. So yeah, it wasn't really as widespread. Or at least the things that I ran into were not as widespread. It was much more localized. Um, the only real thing, like I said, when I was doing like the online investigations, it really, back then it was a totally different environment, because most people did not have laptops. Most people didn't have webcams, or if they did, it was they weren't built into every device we have, like we have today. And the big takeaway we'd always tell folks is, like, don't let your kids take their laptops or their computers up to their room, monitor what they're doing, have it in public spaces. That's kind of going away because everyone has laptops now. Everyone has, or phones, and have cameras. So that's a lot harder to monitor. But as far as the actual cast of characters, to your point, it's much different now as far as just the global reach. Like I used to say, prior to the advent of the internet, and even going back before that, like Prodigy and chat rooms and all those different
Right.
things, you used to have to worry about like the person down the street. Now you have to worry about the person on the other side of the town or the country or the state or whatever, because it just makes everything much more consolidated. So that your child in this instance could be talking to someone across the country as easily as they could talk to someone across the state or across town or next to a neighbor. And I've had cases where people would travel, multiple states away to meet with whoever, and it was never, obviously, it ended well for them, for the perpetrator. But there's a lot of things that go on, that don't get caught, and that's the sad part. Is people get more and more sophisticated using tools to obfuscate who they are, where they're coming from, all that kind of good stuff. You've heard the term
Right.
catfishing, obviously, and people pretend to be other folks, and so you have new crimes kind of emanating from that around um, cyberbullying in general, but then cyberbullying for money, or for whatever the case might be. They'll use that as kind of like um, oh, what's the word I'm looking for? Basically, just forcing people to do things they don't want to do, but holding ransom over their head. So not ransomware in the sense of um,
No.
corporate encrypting hard drives and so forth, but ransomware is holding people at ransom, cyberbullying, having them send whatever money or pictures or whatever, um, at the threat of releasing things to their friends, their family, their contacts. Basically, extortion is the word I was looking for. Um, so yeah, that has definitely changed. With the advent of the dark web, that's changed quite a bit too. Obviously, there's marketplaces out there that exist. You can, like you said, malware as a service, ransomware for hire, and with AI tools, it becomes a lot easier to
I
create,
was gonna
to
say with
craft.
AI, with now even with deep faking of voices,
Oh yeah,
it's still not perfect. You can, if you're attentive, I think you can tell. But I think if your grandma or your parent that gets a call,
right.
you might be under stress and you won't be listening for those nuances.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. And I've done that in some of my training courses. I've used, some tools like 11 Labs, and there's other ones out there that you upload 10 seconds of your voice and it mimics it pretty closely. And so you can put together voicemails or whatever, ask for, hey, sweetheart, I just dropped my phone, or I'm locked out of my bank account. Can you text me over our username and password or account details? And if they're not paying attention, they might do that. Or to your point, calling a loved one or a grandparent saying, hey, I just got in an accident, I need money for a tow truck, or whatever. And if they're not aware of those things, they'll fall super easily fall prey. That's one of the reasons we always say, if you run into a situation where you think that is in fact the case, then to have some type of safe word or a safe phrase or some type of safe question that you can ask the person on the phone that only the real person would know. So that way that allows you to kind of very quickly determine, is this a real call or is this a fake.
Now, Chris, you mentioned one of your training courses is around disaster recovery, backup. Why is this statistic that I have read, now there's variations of it, but basically between 67 to 70% of backups fail on restoration or get the company back online? What's the root cause behind that?
Well, that's a great question. And a lot of it, I think it's in some degree situational. I actually used to manage a storage and data protection team for quite a while. So that is a real thing for sure. Part of it is because, number one, you assume, or the company or whoever, the backup guy assumes that the backups are legit and they're functional. They never test them, so that you could be backing things up for months or years and never test. And the one time you need it, it's not functional for whatever reason. So testing backups regularly is rule number one. But then secondly, there's different types of backups. You have crash consistent, you have application consistent. So in most environments, it's not just a single computer. It's an end-tier environment. So you'll have front end load balancers, databases, whatever, web servers, the actual servers. You might have multiple clusters involved, and all of those things have to be backed up in tandem, and they have to be restored in a certain order. So if those things are not restored properly, or you miss some of the backups, or things are just not brought up in the right fashion, those things can fail. So a lot of the systems are incredibly complex. If it's just a straight data backup, you can nine times out of 10 recover the data, or you might have the data itself, but that data feeds any number of other systems. And if those systems aren't backed up, then it doesn't do you a lot of good. So a lot of times it's just a kind of a combination of not taking a full accounting top to bottom of what it takes to bring that specific thing back up.
Is there still a role for physical media in this exercise, or is there what is the strategy to break the backup from your network, if you will, so that when ransomware hits, it's not encrypting the backup along with it? Is there a recommendation that you're training for in those situations?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you can do a couple different things. I mean, obviously, back, I don't want to say the old days, but a lot of companies still use it, but you have physical tapes. Physical tapes can be disconnected from the network, and that's obviously, a good way to not have things encrypted. With VTLs and virtual tape libraries and online backups nowadays, that's a little bit harder, because if you have ransomware that is able to jump that network, that's an issue. But a lot of times you can have things either offline, virtually air gapped, or logically air gapped. You can have cyber vaults in place so that you have your primary backup. You might have a secondary backup as a failover, maybe in a secondary site. So that way, you have site disparity or diversity. But then you might have a cyber vault, whereas it's logically disconnected from any other network, or physically for that matter. And it only opens up for a short period of time. The backups, it's only a one-way traversal. The information can only go in, can't come out. And then depending upon how sophisticated that is, you might have some things inside that cyber vault that can do deep level offline scans to make sure that there's no corruption or ransomware or things along those lines. So there's that. You can also back up to the cloud, which can be disconnected. You can do offsite backups like Iron Mountain and places like that can do it as well. The problem sometimes is the bad actors are becoming more and more sophisticated, so they'll let things sit and lie in wait for days, weeks, months, or more. So you're backing up potentially infected files for months before you even realize it. So sometimes you have to make sure that things are completely clean, because you can basically do all your restores, get things back up and running, and they flick a switch and everything gets corrupted again or encrypted again, because the actual root cause was not determined. So simply restoring is not, in and of itself, is not necessarily 100%. You have to make sure all the gaps are remediated, all the doors are locked basically, and then you actually have a clean environment to back up into, or restore into, I should say.
Yes, you have to trust the baseline, and that is your gamble, I guess.
Yeah.
That's the risk, because that baseline very well could be corrupted. And if it's corrupted, all of it is in jeopardy potentially.
Yeah, I mean, and there are certainly some tools out there. I mean, a lot of sophisticated tools that can measure for entropy, and it can determine pretty quickly if things start to become corrupt. You know, there's a number of different ways to identify that and shut things down. Obviously, you can put things in place that can automatically take ports offline, or automatically take some of your network segments down, or if you have microsegmentation set up properly, that can thwart some of that as well. But then on the other side of the coin, that can also become an attack surface. They can just basically DDoS a specific segment and then make you shut down ports and take your business offline without actually corrupting anything. So there's really it's a dual-edged sword. There's no kind of one size fits all. It's really a matter of what fits the business and what the risk tolerance is.
There's that word, risk, which is used so often. Out of curiosity, as an instructor, is there a methodology or approach that you like to have your students look at when they're trying to determine risk or to quantify risk? Or what's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, it really boils down to well, it's business dependent, obviously, but there's a business impact analysis you can do and just look at, the feasibility of it. What's the impact of it? How important is it? So you could spend a lot of money mitigating a risk that, if it were actually executed, wouldn't be that big of a deal, or vice versa. If you're not really identifying that properly, you're underfunding risks that have a high degree of executability and perhaps a high degree of impact. So again, it really boils down to kind of putting things into like a four quarter quadrant and just understanding where things fall. If you don't necessarily have to remediate every single CVE that comes down the pipe, if you don't have anything in your environment that matches that. And sometimes, folks that necessarily maybe aren't in the know, but they get the reports, might look at, oh my God, there's 15 or 20 different vulnerabilities here. We have to jump on this and patch all of those. And come to find out, you only have maybe a handful of those systems in place, or where they're actually valid. So when it gets down to the security level, those folks understand that, obviously, but the higher up you go in the food chain, sometimes that's not as immediately apparent. So really, it's just a matter of remediating based upon impact analysis and how important it really is, or how much of a implosion, if you will, would that cause the business if it were realized.
When you look at just some of the brief topics we've covered here, backups, bad actors, ransomware as a service, assessment of risk, cybersecurity is a giant area.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone wants to make a career switch into it,
mm-hmm.
it can be mind-boggling to them as a novice. Where do they even start? How do you coach those folks?
Yeah, and that's a great question too, because as with everything within IT, it always starts out. The first answer is always, it depends. So it really is a matter of what do they have a passion for, and sometimes they don't know, because, like I said, you don't know what you don't know. So working in a small company, a consulting company, a security based company is certainly good to get your feet wet, maybe as a SOC analyst, or an entry level job. Certainly working in small companies where you wear multiple hats is also good. The great part about working in consultancies or SOC type of environments is you get a pretty wide exposure to a lot of different companies at once, versus just how one specific company does things, because there's obviously multiple ways to do pretty much anything.
Right.
And then also, like you said, there's so many different avenues to go into. You can do network security, you can do perimeter security, you can do OS patching, you can do cyber logs, you can do some other ones, AI or anti-AI, however you want to look at it. adversarial type stuff. You can do threat intelligence analysis. I mean, there's so many different areas within a specific, within the, or I should say a specific tower within cybersecurity. You can do digital forensics. You can do investigations, e-discovery. I mean, there's a lot of different ways or a lot of different tunnels you can kind of dive into. So, like I said, I would start kind of in the beginning, looking at small companies that need have a security focus or need security, I should say expertise. But if in a perfect world, if I had to do it, I would go into some type of SOC environment or a small consultancy company that I could learn and ramp up very quickly. But by having exposure to a lot of different companies and seeing how they do that, how they do different things, because they'll all have different tools, they'll all have different ways and methods of attacking something that can get you up to speed pretty quickly.
Now, before you can get hired into a small company, you have to have some working knowledge or be able to sell yourself. Is there certain certification paths that you would say are a must-have that you absolutely must do if you're going to make a career switch or contemplating doing a career switch?
Yeah, and again, I mean, I would never say it's an absolute must. It's certainly, I would say, it's a massive thing in your favor. But yeah, I would start off with like some general security certifications, like Security Plus. Obviously, the one I've been creating for a long time. That is probably the best place to start because it's vendor neutral. It gives you a really great understanding of hardware, software, networking. There's some underpinnings of how all that stuff works, but with a security focus. And there's roughly 1,200 topics, I guess, within Security Plus that are covered or objectives. So it's wide enough where it covers pretty much everything you would need from a high level understanding, but it's not so deep that it's completely overwhelming. So it's a great place to start. And then from there, like I said, there's a number of different certifications you can go up, whether it's through CompTIA, whether it's through other areas, CISSP, or a multitude of other certification paths. But there's a lot of ways to go. And again, do you want to work in the public sector, private sector, federal government? All those things kind of determine paths you might take, because there are certain certifications that are required within those specific industries that you might need to focus on.
What's the timeline to get a Security Plus certification? And do you have to do your Network Plus before you do your Security Plus?
No, there's no prerequisites for that. So it certainly helps. I mean, if you're starting off brand new with knowing nothing, then yeah, I would recommend like A Plus and Network Plus first to give you a deeper understanding of hardware and software and networking. But if you have a general understanding of those things, it's not a prerequisite. So I've had many students come through that have a good general working knowledge without a specific cert and come through and pass Security Plus. So from a timeline perspective, if you really put the time and energy into it, 2 to 3 months, I would say, if depending upon, how quickly you learn, and if you're doing hands-on labs, or if you just, some people are visual learners, some people are hands-on, some people can just read something once and just retain it. So, it varies from person to person, but it's definitely attainable.
To me, I guess the hands-on piece to me is critical because, unless you go in and you play in a lab, a lot of this stuff, I don't know how it gets ingrained. Maybe you're right. There are people out there with that brain power that can snap. They read it, they know it, and it works. But, having those labs. So these online courses that you've designed, are they set up with interactive labs?
They are, correct. Yeah, the way Pluralsight does it is basically they have the courseware and then accompanying labs. So from pretty much, I don't know the exact number, but for pretty much most certifications, if not all certifications, there are X number of labs, dozens or more of labs for each topic that get covered. So, and a lot of the courses, a lot of the places are similar. So yeah, labs are definitely important. It gives you kind of, stick time, as I call it, with a specific technology. I would also just kind of preface that and say, that doesn't necessarily mean if you know how to drive a car, you don't know how to drive a tractor trailer necessarily, right? So it's a matter of, you understand the basics of that specific thing. But to me, if you understand conceptually how something works, and just generally how a thing works, you can then transfer that knowledge into other different applications, because every company might have a different platform, and they might have a different way of doing something. They might have a different tool they use. But if you understand the objective and what you're actually looking for, not necessarily what button to click or what lever to pull, but what you're actually looking for, like the fundamental concepts of how to identify risk or malware or indicators of compromise, or even like a hacker's or a bad actor's mindset. That in and of itself, I think, takes you a long way to because you can learn a specific tool, but if you don't understand like the underpinnings and the psychology of why things happen and what things they might be looking for, what are the targets, what are the actual kind of crown jewels of your specific company, you're not quite sure what to protect.
In terms of effectivity of training, is it better, same, or worse if you do it online versus in person? Is there what have you seen?
I'm a little bit biased just because I'm an online trainer first and foremost. I mean, I've done classroom training quite a bit, but to me, and again, this is assuming you actually have a good online trainer. Online to me is better only because you can go through the course over and over and over and over again. You can go back and rewatch. You can go back and take it again if you need to. When you take an online course, you kind of rolling the dice a bit. You might have a great instructor who's just best thing since sliced bread, and you lucked out and you're great. Or you might have an instructor that you don't click with for whatever reason, and you go through for a week or 2 week or however long that course might be a 6-month course, depending on if it's a in-depth or a boot camp or whatever. And then it's a one and done. So then you don't have a chance to necessarily go back. Some places might allow you to audit that course again one time, but you don't have the ability to go over and over and over again. So for me, online works better in that fashion. You can do it at your own pace. You can do some in the morning. You can listen while you're on your way to work. You can listen, after hours. You have that flexibility. But again, some people, it doesn't work for everybody. Some people like to be in a class, asking questions to a specific instructor and getting that that one-on-one feedback. So again, it's personal preference, but I think generally speaking, online is a better way to go, just because you have the reusability.
Makes sense, especially when you talk about being able to go back and take those classes again and again and again. I guess the one thing that's even there, you might have an issue with maybe not the instructor as an individual, but the course as it's generally set up, and that these are somewhat complex topics. Depending on the company you're working with, they may not have simplified them to the point into the right bite-sized chunks that are comprehensible.
That's true.
How do you address that problem?
Yeah, well, and again, I'm speaking around certification courses. So CompTIA or whoever the certifying body might be, they give you a set of objectives. So you have X number to cover. So no matter where you take it from, they're going to cover the same objectives. So a certification is a little bit different sometimes from a specific course for a specific company. Like if you have a custom course, in other words. So yeah, in that instance, you have to really understand what that company, what their goals are, what their success looks like, what their outcomes are. They might want a little bit of training on this specific topic, some other training on this specific topic, some training on this specific program, and so forth. So you have to make sure that you're tailoring it to the customer's needs in that regard. Certification courses, like I said, are a tiny bit different just because there's a set number of objectives. But yeah, it really does. It varies. I mean, like I said, there's no one size fits all. I will circle back on one point though. Basically, when you have, assuming it's good training, but if you have good training that's online and you need to put, say, 500 people through that training, you can pretty much be guaranteed that all 500 people get the same content. They get the same, it's repeatable and it's consistent. So they're all getting the same type of training versus if you send, 10 people this time, 10 people next time, 10 people next time to different online or physical courses, there's no guarantee that they're all going to get the same material or get it delivered in the same capacity. So from a consistency sake, I think that, again, online makes better sense, but it really, like I said, boils down to the quality of the company and the quality of the instruction.
How do you see AI changing these certifications?
Yeah, I think AI is going to change everything, not just training, obviously, but I do think it's going to augment quite a bit, because I think education in general, because it's going to make it very much tailored to the actual individual. So you can tell the AI that you're happen to be using, I want to learn this. I want to learn, X, Y, Z, but I want to learn it in this fashion. This is this is what resonates more to me. Make analogies, or give me visuals, give me a movie, or set up some labs for me, or do, whatever the case might be. And the AI will tailor it specifically to how that individual learner learns. So I think even from like K through 12, that's going to change quite a bit, because people can now, instead of having teachers, and I'm not trying to be disparaging and whatnot, but traditionally, a lot of times you have to kind of teach to the lowest common denominator in a course or in
Yep.
a class so that everyone can progress. Whereas when you do it in an AI fashion, at least how I envision it, that becomes very much tailored. So the smartest person and the lowest person in that classroom are going to get exactly what they need, and can progress as fast as they need to. So you might have one person curing cancer at the end of a course, and another person that's still learning the very basics, but you don't have a teacher that is kind of trying to accommodate everybody at the same time. So AI is going to, I think, it's going to hyper personalize that whole experience.
What about replacing some of these fundamental roles? I mean, we're exploring it, in our SOC. I mean, I can tell you right now the technology isn't there, but I can
Mhm.
absolutely see a day where a SOC analyst, or maybe a level one SOC analyst, really isn't even needed anymore. I mean, the
Yeah.
AI can do the job.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
same thing with like a security plus. I'm not being disparaging, but if you look at the content that's in there,
Hmm.
it's just like taking the SAT. Why can't, ChatGPT scores better on the SAT than a lot of American high school
Right.
students. So
Yeah.
why can't it just score just as well on Security Plus? And now the data is, if it's just there, it
Hmm.
nullifies the
Yeah.
effectivity of it.
Yeah, no, I definitely don't disagree with that. I think, like with anything, there's a human element that needs to come into play. I mean, at least for the foreseeable future, AI will not be at like AGI level, and
Right.
that changes day by day. So who knows when that's going to actually appear? But the fact is that you have a human element that can um, not outthink, but can think differently, maybe that AI didn't account for, uh, or can be fooled in one fashion, or can be abused um, in one form or fashion. But on top of that, you have just the general reliance on it, so that if something were to break, and if no one knows how anything works, then who's going to fix it? So you're still going to need people that understand things under the hood and how things operate, because AI is great. I mean, it's an amazing tool, but if those skills go away completely and we're completely reliant on nothing but AI, if AI breaks or gets compromised or whatever, it's just like when you go to a cash register, right? Kind of making an older analogy. Um, Kids nowadays don't know how to make change. So if the cash register goes down, they have no idea how to make change and give it back to you. So, extrapolate that out to a much more deep technical concept. When things break, if there's no one there that knows how to fix anything, you're in a deep hole. So I think that those roles are not going to, at least I would hope they don't go away completely, but they're definitely going to be augmented by AI, and I'm hoping that those folks just move on to higher level functions, but still retain an
That's what I
understanding
would
of how
have
it
thought.
works.
Just what you just said, that they move on to higher level functions, Chris,
Yeah.
because they're, instead of, you know, doing long division, you can use a calculator now,
Hmm.
So let the grunt work let the machine do it. But really the interpretation of that
Yeah.
is something where real intelligence is required, is where the value becomes very, very high. So it's a transformation. And I guess with that, maybe certifications would change as well. The content of these classes might change.
Yeah, I definitely think the content will change, and they do change just from um, revision to revision, but sometimes not as much as others. But yeah, that will definitely change. But as long as the actual targets a lot of times are still humans, right? And you have the emotional component to it, the social engineering component to it. That's going to be very hard to necessarily mimic, just because every single person is different. Every single person reacts
Absolutely.
differently, right? So that is going to be hard to completely replace. But I do think that AI will make a lot of people's jobs easier. It's kind of the uh, the taglines, like AI is not going to take your job, but somebody using AI might take your job. So it's going to make that person much more effective and be able to do a lot more with a lot less you know physical manpower.
I'll get worried when AI starts replacing bad actors. When you have evil AI, if you can
Yeah. Well,
get
they
a
have.
machine to get that good where it can exploit human emotion, depict human emotion,
Mhm.
and cause and socially engineer an attack, Well, now you're in a totally different world.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, we're not quite there yet.
No, we're not. No, we're not even close. But yeah.
from scratch, but they can certainly use those tools to help kind of push that can down the lane. But yeah, there's still some bad actors behind it that are initiating all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, AI makes a lot of that social engineering quite a bit easier. They can scrape every single thing you've ever done online. They can take snippets here, snippets there, and build a profile of you and make it really convincing, and then go talk to a coworker or a loved one or whatever business associate and make it sound just like you. The same use of emojis, the same slang, the same whatever, because they've been potentially monitoring your email for 6 months or a year, or whatever the case might be. They can track a lot of your stuff. They know where you're vacationing, what you've bought, what your favorite sports team is, whatever. They can use all of that in conversation to make it sound very much like you. And if they're also cloning your voice, I mean, it can be pretty convincing.
It can be. I mean, we've talked about that case overseas in the Far East where that poor banking clerk sent 15 or $25 million, I forget the exact number,
Yeah.
on a deep fake Zoom call.
Right.
Because as a result of it.
Right. I was going to
That
say the
must have
same
been
thing.
some deep fake.
Yeah. I think if that's what I'm thinking of, they had like a number of different folks on the Zoom call, and then they had a follow up from an outside attorney that followed up on the call like it was legitimate. And I mean, everything seemed like it was 100% up and up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the guy executed what he thought his bosses wanted done.
Right.
And so why rob a bank when the bank employees will come out and just give you the bag of money? I mean, it's a lot safer.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Couple that with the fact that, extradition laws and just the ability to actually go out and try to apprehend folks in some countries is almost impossible. So they realize they can do things without much risk.
If you're, again, getting back to coaching a little bit, because we do have a lot of folks that are practitioners in cybersecurity that listen to this show.
Mm-hmm.
So folks who are looking to maybe, instead of make a transition into cyber, but are looking to elevate their career in cyber, is
Mm-hmm.
there a training path that you would guide them towards? Or directions?
You're saying like they don't want to necessarily work in cyber specifically, but they just want to be more cyber aware?
No, they are there. So they're a SOC analyst today,
Mm-hmm.
right? And now they don't want to be a SOC analyst anymore, and they want to become a security architect, or they want to become a threat hunter, or get into intelligence.
Right.
Is there a training set of pathways for those people, or what would you suggest? Where do they begin this?
Yeah, good question. I mean, my specific area of focus is traditionally been on the CompTIA side since I start off with Security Plus. So you have CIATP, you can have advanced threat analysis practitioner. There are you can do like some DFIR, like forensics types of courses and so forth. So it really depends on if you want to go into like threat intelligence and analysis and be someone that augments other security teams and like enriches their threat feeds and so forth, and kind of deep dives on specific bad actors, and whether you're using MITRE framework or whatever, baseline for understanding who's coming in, what they might particularly target, how they're targeting, and ramping up your defenses against those specific threats, indicators of compromise and so forth. Or if you're looking at digital forensics, forensics is really, I think, an interesting field because it can go so many different pathways, whether it's investigations for corporate investigations, banking investigations, financial fraud and so forth. You can go into, or like I said, online cybercrime predator types investigations. It really, that runs the gamut. So it crosses industries, crosses every vertical. But threat intelligence, a lot of companies, at least in my experience, outside of like the medium-sized to bigger-sized companies, don't have a lot of resources to bring in-house like threat intelligence analysts and so forth. So they'll use Recorded Future or some other ones that can provide threat feeds and kind of augment what they're currently doing. But even that's kind of more relegated to like the I'd say medium or larger companies. So if you're able to take that same level of understanding and kind of pitch it or market it towards smaller companies and give that level, kind of like an enterprise level of expertise to smaller companies, I think that would be a differentiator for a lot of folks who are, especially if you're looking to break in. So you can do it at a smaller scale to get your feet wet before you can move on to bigger and larger environments.
Very good advice, Chris.
Yeah.
We're actually at the hour, believe it or not. We also
Okay.
want to give you a couple minutes to go ahead and plug anything you'd like to. What do you want to let our audience know about?
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I would say check out, my courses at Pluralsight, pluralsight.com. I have Security Plus is one I've been working on for quite a long time and very, very proud of. But I have a few other courses on social media, personal privacy. As I mentioned, I have one Internet of Things that's coming out.
Fantastic, Chris. Well, we're glad you do the work that you do.
Thank you very
know,
much.
keeping up on all the relevant changes, and there's a ton of them. I won't even can't fathom how long it takes you to keep updating the materials. That's got to be a job and a half.
Yeah, the training is. It's a labor of love. It's fun, but yeah, it's definitely probably a 20-to-1, if not more ratio, depending upon how detailed a subject is. But yeah, for an hour of content might take you 20, 30, 40 hours to, as anyone knows who does video editing and just background research and just keeping up on things. It's constant.
You should, someone with your background, you should write a book, something like The Hitchhiker's Guide to Cybersecurity.
Yeah, you're not the first person to say that. I have to be able to clone myself, I think, and just get some more time.
I think it would be needed, because I think we see a lot of materials that are very technical, but how it all bridges together and connecting the dots is something that's sorely lacking in the industry. And that's where all the magic happens. It's not in the tool itself. It's in the integration of the whole.
Right.
See what the big picture is.
Yeah. And like I said, and as you know, 90% of most breaches, they still occur the same way. The inroads are still the same. It's a social engineering, phishing email, or some type of social engineering tactic. So that is really the biggest thing, making people aware of, what to do and what not to do. And most people, they either don't pay attention or they just assume, people have good intentions. So ingraining that in people's minds would go probably halfway down the path of securing an enterprise or a company, but a lot of people just don't pay attention.
Well, audience, pay attention. How about that? That's a great note to end this podcast on. Chris, thank you for being here. Really appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.